A U.S. Federal Government Health and Medical Agency Guide. Chapter 1. The National Institutes of Health, NIH. The National Institutes of Health, NIH/27 Specialty Government Health Agencies. NIH.gov/ICD Institutes, list of the 27 institutes and centers that make up the NIH. NLM.nih.gov, U.S. National Library of Medicine. NIH.gov, National Institutes of Health. nlm.nih.gov/medlineplus/faq/faq.html, FAQs. nlm.nih.gov/medlineplus/druginformation.html. nlm.nih.gov/medlineplus/videos and cooltools.html. nlm.nih.gov/medlineplus/libraries.html, find a library. Administration for Children and Families. 400 6th Street Southwest. Number 5030. Washington, D.C. 20013. 202-755-7762. Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. 5600 Fishers Lane. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 301-294-1012. Information about specific drugs and medications. Clearinghouse for Occupational Safety and Health Information. 4676 Columbia Parkway. Cincinnati, Ohio 45226. 835 Nhsc. 513-533-8326. Fax, 513-533-8573. cdc.gov/niosh/homepage.html. Drugs and Crime Data Center. And Clearinghouse. 1600 Research Boulevard. Rockville, Maryland 20850. 800-666-3332. Federal Information Center. 800-688-9889. 800-326-2996. fic.info.gov. Food and Drug Administration. 5600 Fishers Lane. HFA 88. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 301-827-4420. 800-532-4440. Fax, 301-443-9767. FDA.gov. Food and Nutrition Information Center. National Agricultural Library. USDA. 10301 Baltimore Boulevard. Number 304. Beltsville, Maryland 20705. 301-504-5719. Fax, 301-504-6409. nal.usda.gov/Nhc. Housing and Urban Development. Drug Information and Strategy Clearinghouse. POB 6424. Rockville, Maryland 20850. 800-578-3472. 301-519-5154. Fax, 301-519-6655. HUD.gov. National Aging Information Center. U.S. Administration on Aging. 330 Independence Avenue. SW. Number 4656. Washington, D.C. 20201. 800-411-2112. 202-554-9800. 202-554-0571, TDD. Fax, 202-554-0695. aoa.dhhs.gov/Nhsc. National Cancer Institute. 9000 Rockville Pike. Building 31. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 800-4 Cancer. 301-496-5583. Fax, 301-402-2594. nci.nih.gov. Beyond free publications, they also have clinics where they do research. You could be accepted as a patient. National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Center for Disease Control. 4770 Buford Highway. Ms. K13. Atlanta, Georgia, 30341. 770-488-5080. Fax, 770-488-5969. cdc.gov/nccdphp/nccdhome.htm. National Center for Education in Maternal and Child Health. 2000, 15th Street North. Number 701. Arlington, Virginia, 22201. 703-524-7802. Fax, 703-524-9335. ncmch.org. National Center on Health Statistics. Data Dissemination Branch. 6525 Bellcrest Road. Number 1064. Hyattsville, MD 207823001-436-8500. cdc.gov/nchshome.htm. National Center on Sleep Disorders. Research. 2. Rockledge Center. 6701 Rockledge Drive. MSC 7920. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-435-0199. Fax, 301-480-3451. nhlby.nih.gov/nhlby/nhlby.htm. National Child Care Information Center. 301 Maple Avenue West. Number 602. Vienna, Virginia 22180. 800-516-2242. 800-616-2242. 800-516-2242, TDD. Fax, 800-716-2242. ericps.crc.uiuc.edu/nccIC/nccIChome.html. National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect Information. POG 1182. Washington, D.C. 20013. 800 FYI 3366. 703-385-7565. Fax, 703-385-3206. calibi.com/nccnch. National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth. POG 13505. Silver Spring, Maryland 20911. 301-608-8098. Fax, 301-608-8721. acf.dhhs.gov/program/fisb/program/ncfy.htm. National Clearinghouse for Drug and Alcohol Information. POG 2345. Rockville, Maryland 20847. 800-729-6686. 301-468-2600. 800-487-4889, TDD. 301-230-2867, TDD. Fax, 301-468-6433. Health.org. National Clearinghouse for Primary Care Information. 2070 Chainbridge Road. Number 450. Vienna, Virginia 22182. 800-400-2742. 703-821-8955. 703-566-4831, TDD. Fax, 703-821-2098. bphc.hrsa.dhhs.gov. 158.72.85.159/Psi. Maternal. National Clearinghouse for Worker Safety and Health Training for Hazardous, Waste Ops and Emergency Response. 10,000 New Hampshire Avenue, Silver Spring, Maryland 20903. 301-431-5425. Fax, 301-431-6464. nhs.nih.gov/wetp/clear.htm. National Clearinghouse on Family Support and Children's Mental Health. Portland State University. POB 751. Portland, Oregon 97207. 800-628-1696. 800-735-2900, TDD. 503-725-4040. Fax, 503-725-4180. pdx.edu. National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse. 1. Information Way. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-654-3327. Fax, 301-907-8906. niddk.nih.gov/brochures/ndc.htm. National Digestive Diseases Information Clearinghouse. 2. Information Way. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-654-3810. Fax, 301-907-8906. niddk.nih.gov/brochures/nddic.htm. National Eye Institute. 2020 Vision Place. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-5248. nei.nih.gov. National Health Information Center. Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Number 2132. 330C St. S.W. Washington, D.C. 20201. 800-336-4797. 301-565-4167. Fax, 301-984-4256. Nhic-nt.health.org. Contains listing of all healthcare centers nationwide. You call them with a health question. They refer it to the appropriate agency, who then call you back free. Also, ask about their NIH publications list, which lists all the health publications they offer. National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. POB 30105. Bethesda, Maryland 20824. 800-575 Well. 301-251-1222. Fax, 301-251-1223. nhlby.nih.gov/nhlby/infocent.htm. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. 400 7th Street Southwest. Washington, D.C. 20590. 800-424-9393. 202-366-0123. Fax, 202-366-5962. Nhtsf.gov. National Information Center for Children and Youth with Disabilities. POB 1492. Washington, D.C. 20013. 800-695-0285. 800-922-9234. 800-695-0285, TDD. 202-884-8200. Fax, 202-884-8441. Nhsc.org. National Injury Clearinghouse. U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. 4330 EW Highway. Bethesda, Maryland 20814. 800-638-2772. 301-504-0424. Fax 301-504-0124. cpsc.gov. National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. Building 31, #2A32. 9000, Rockville Pike. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-5133. nih.gov/NicHD. nichd.nih.gov. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Building 31, #7A50. 31, Center Drive, MSC 2520. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-5717. Fax 301-402-0120. niaid.nih.gov. National Institute of Arthritis, Musculoskeletal and Skin Disorders. 9000, Rockville Pike. Building 31. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-8188. nih.gov/NIOMS. National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. 1. Communication Avenue. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 800-241-1044. 800-241-1055, TDD. Fax 301-907-8830. nih.gov/NIDCD. National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research. 45, Center Drive. MSC 6400. Bethesda, Maryland 20892-6400. nidr.nih.gov. National Institute of Diabetics and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. Building 31, #9A4. 31, Center Drive, MSC 2560. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-3583. niddk.nih.gov. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. nhs.nih.gov. National Institute of General Medical Sciences. 45, Center Drive, MSC 6200. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-7301. Fax 301-402-0224. nih.gov/NIGMS. Educational materials about the latest research. National Institute of Mental Health. 5600 Fishers Lane. #7C02. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 301-443-4513. 301-443-8431, TDD. Fax 301-443-4279. Fax back 301-443-5158. 800-532-4440. 800-956-6264. 800-64 Panic disorders. 800-421-4211, depression. nimh.nih.gov. National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. 9000, Rockville Pike. Building 31. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-496-7243. Nhsc.nih.gov. National Institute on Aging. Building 31, #5C27. 31, Center Drive, MSC 2292. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 800-222-2225. 800-222-4225, TDD. 301-496-1752. Fax, 301-496-1072. nih.gov/Nih. National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases. Information Clearinghouse. 3. Information Way. Bethesda, Maryland, 20892. 800-891-5388. 301-654-4415. Fax, 301-907-8906. niddk.nih.gov/brochures/nkudic.htm. National Lead Information Center. 1019 19th Street Northwest. Number 401. Washington, D.C. 20036. 800-424 lead. 800 lead FYI. 800-526-5456, TDD. 202-833-1071. Fax, 202-659-1192. nhsc.org/sc/lead.htm. epa.gov/lead/Nhic. National Library of Medicine. 8600 Rockville Pike. Bethesda, Maryland, 20894. 800-272-4787. 800-638-8480. 800-338-7657, Medlar's Database. 301-496-6095. Publicinfo@nlm.nih.gov. igm.nim.nih.gov. healthfinder.gov. medlineplus.gov. nlm.nih.gov/database/freemedl.html. ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. World's largest medical library, many online services. National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. 1291 Taylor Street Northwest. Washington, D.C. 20542. 800-424-8567. 202-707-5100. 202-707-0744, TDD. Fax, 202-707-0712. lcweb.loc.gov/NLS. National Maternal and Child Health Clearinghouse. 2070 Chainbridge Road. Number 450. Vienna, Virginia 22182-2536. 703-821-8955. Fax, 703-821-2098. circsoul.com/mch. Free page book, Reaching Out, a directory of national organizations related to maternal and child health. National Oral Health Information Clearinghouse. 1. Nhic Way. Bethesda, Maryland 20892. 301-403-7364. Fax, 301-907-8830. nidr.nih.gov. National Rehabilitation Information Center. 8455 Colesville Road. Number 935. Silver Spring, Maryland 20910. 800-346-2742. 800-346-2742, TDD. 301-588-9284. Fax, 301-587-1967. Nhsc.com/Nhsc. National Resource Center on Homelessness and Mental Illness. 262 Delaware Avenue. Del Mar, New York 12054. 800-444-7415. 518-439-7415. Fax, 518-439-7612. samhsa.gov/cmhs/cmhs/cmhs.htm. National Sudden Death Infant Syndrome Resource Center. 2070 Chainbridge Road, Vienna, Virginia 22182. 703-821-8955. Fax, 703-821-2098. circsol.com/sids. National Technical Information Service. U.S. Department of Commerce. 5285 Port Royal Road, Springfield, Virginia 22161. 800-553 Nhtsf. 703-487-4650. Fax, 703-321-8547. Ntisf.gov. Nhsc, National Audiovisual Center. Ntisf.gov. Ntisf.gov/database. grc.ntic.gov, database for a fee. worldtech.fedworld.gov, science and technology database. Sells publications on most areas of life, free catalog. Also has several medical databases. Sells many films, publications, and computer software. Office of Alternative Medicine Clearinghouse. POB 8218. Silver Spring, Maryland 20907. 888-644-6226. 888-644-6226, TDD. Fax, 301-495-4957. Fax back, 800-531-1794. altmed.od.nih.gov/oam/clearinghouse. Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Number 738. 200 Independence Avenue, SW. Washington, D.C. 20201. 800-336-4797. 202-205-8611. odp.od.nih.gov. Federal Government Clearinghouse for the latest medical information. Office of Medical Applications of Research. POB 2577. Kensington, Maryland 20891. 888-644-2667. Fax, 301-816-2494. odp.od.nih.gov/consensus. Latest biomedical developments. Office of Minority Health. Rockwall 2 Building. 5600 Fishers Lane, Rockville, Maryland 20857. 800-444-6472. Fax, 301-565-5112. omhrc.gov. Office of Pollution Affairs. Clearinghouse. POB 30686. Bethesda, Maryland 20824. 301-654-6190. Fax, 301-215-7731. hhs.gov/progerg/opa/clearing.html. Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. U.S. Department of Education. 330C St. S.W. Switzer Building. Number 3132. Washington, D.C. 20202. 202-205-8241. Fax, 202-401-2608. ed.gov/offices/ozers. Office on Smoking and Health. CDC. Ms. K50. 4770 Buford Highway, Nih. Atlanta, Georgia 30341. 800 CDC 1311. 770-488-5705. Fax, 770-488-5939. cdc.gov/nccdphp/osg/tobacco.htm. Policy Information Center. U.S. Department of Health and Human SVCs. Hubert Humphrey Building. #438F. 200 Independence Avenue. SW. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-690-2000. Fax, 202-690-5211. os.dhhs.gov. President's Council on Physical Fitness. 701 Pennsylvania Avenue. NW. Number 250. Washington, D.C. 20004. 202-690-9000. Fax, 202-690-5211. whitehouse.gov/wh/bcpfs/html/fitnet.html. Rural Information Center. Health Service. National Agricultural Library. Number 304. 10301 Baltimore Boulevard. Beltsville, Maryland 20705. 800-633-7701. 301-504-5547. Fax, 301-504-5181. nal.usda.gov/ric/riches. Surgeon General. 200 Independence Avenue. SW. Number 716. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-690-6467. surgeongeneral.gov. U.S. Coast Guard Office of Boating Safety. 2100 2nd Street Southwest. Washington, D.C. 20593. 800-368-5647. 202-267-1077. 800-689-0816, TDD. uscgboating.org. uscg.gov. U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Washington, D.C. 20207. 800-638-2772. 800-638-8270, TDD. 301-504-0580. Fax, 301-504-0399. cpsc.gov. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. 401 M St. SW. Number 3404. Washington, D.C. 20460. 202-260-5922. Fax, 202-260-6257. epa.gov. U.S. General Accounting Office. POB 6015. Gaithersburg, Maryland 20884. 202-512-6000. Fax, 301-258-4066. info@gao.gov. gao.gov. Many publications. U.S. Federal Government Medical Agencies from tools.ispor.org/HTA roadmap/Health Authority America.asp. hhs.gov/about, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. fda.gov/default.htm, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. cms.gov, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. ahrq.gov, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ. egappreviews.org, Evaluation of Genomic Applications in Practice and Prevention, EGAP. Chapter 2. hhs.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. hhs.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These are all federal agencies. If writing, preface all these addresses with Department of Health and Human Services. hhs.gov/about/index.html number sign agencies, 12 agencies, 800-368-1019, voice, 800-537-7697, TDD. The Administration for Children and Families. Administration on Aging. Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, formerly the Healthcare Financing Administration. Food and Drug Administration. Health Resources and Services Administration. Indian Health Service. National Institutes of Health. Program Support Center. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. ssa.gov/disability, Social Security Administration Office of Disability. Administers disability insurance programs under Title 16 of the Social Security Act. 800-772-1213, voice. 800-325-0778, TDD. Department of Health and Human Services. 200 Independence Avenue SW. Room 118. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-245-6296. 800-368-5779, Whistleblower Hotline. os.dhhs.gov. dhhs.gov. hhs.gov. Will provide information about virtually all aspects of health. os.dhhs.gov. aoa.dhhs.gov, Administration on Aging. acf.dhhs.gov, Administration for Children and Families. acpr.gov, Agency for Healthcare Policy and Research. etstra1.etstra.cdc.government 8000/etstrome.html, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. cdc.gov, Center for Disease Control. cdrh.fda.gov, Center for Devices and Radiological Health. acf.dhhs.gov, Children and Families Administration. fda.gov, Food and Drug Administration. hcfa.gov, cms.hhs.gov, Healthcare Financing Administration. hrsa.dhhs.gov, Health Resources and Services Administration. nci.nih.gov, National Cancer Institute. nhs.nih.gov, National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. nih.gov, National Institute of Health. nimh.nih.gov, National Institute of Mental Health. hhs.gov, Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. osofs.dhhs.gov/ophs, Office of Public Health and Science, OPS. cms.gov, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. fda.gov, Food and Drug Administration, FDA. acf.dhhs.gov, Administration for Children and Families, ACF. aoa.dhhs.gov, Administration on Aging, AOA. hrsa.dhhs.gov, Health Resources and Services Administration, OURSA. samhsa.gov, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. ahrq.gov, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, ARC. ihs.gov, Indian Health Service, IHS. nih.gov, National Institutes of Health, NIH. cdc.gov, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. cdc.gov/NIOSH, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. cdc.gov/NCHS, National Center for Health Statistics, NCHS. cdc.gov/NCIPC, National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, NCIPC. cdc.gov/nccdphp, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, NCCDPHP. cdc.gov/nci.dod, National Center for Infectious Diseases, NSID. cdc.gov/nceh, National Center for Environmental Health, NSET. atsdr.cdc.gov, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, etc. health.gov/environment, Environmental Health Policy Committee, EPC. Administration for Children, Youth, and Families. 400, 6th Street Southwest. Number 5030. Washington, D.C. 20013. 202-755-7762. acf.dhhs.gov. Administration for Native Americans. 330 Independence Avenue. SW. Number 5300. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-245-7776. Administration on Aging. 330 Independence Avenue. SW. Number 4760. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-245-0724. aoa.dhhs.gov. Administration of Developmental Disabilities. 200 Independence Avenue. SW. Hashtag 348E5. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-245-2890. Agency for Healthcare Policy and Research. 2101 E. Jefferson. Number 501. Rockville, Maryland 20852. acpr.gov. AIDS Hotline. Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. 800-342-AIDS. 800-344-7432 Spanish speaking. 800-243-7889 Spanish TDD. Alcohol, Drug Abuse, and Mental Health Administration. 5600 Fishers Lane. Hashtag 6C15. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 301-443-2086. 800-532-4440. nimh.nih.gov, National Institute of Mental Health. Health.org. Bureau of Healthcare Delivery. 5600 Fishers Lane. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 800-532-4440. Center for Disease Control. 1600 Clifton Road. Nih. Atlanta, Georgia 30333. 404-329-3311. 800-311-3435. cdc.gov. Child Abuse and Neglect Clearinghouse. Department of Health and Human Services. 330 C Street, SW. Washington, D.C. 20201. 202-205-8586. 800-394-3366. calib.com/nccnch. Division of Child and Maternal Health. 5600 Fishers Lane. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 800-532-4440. Division of Nursing. 5600 Fishers Lane. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 800-532-4440. Division Primary Care Services. 5600 Fishers Lane. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 800-532-4440. Food and Drug Administration. Department of Health and Human Services. 5600 Fishers Lane. Room 1675. Rockville, Maryland 20857. 301-443-3380. 800-532-4440, 888-463-6332, FDA.gov, Food and Drug Administration, Food Safety and Nutrition Hotline, 800-332-4010, 800-638-6725, FDA.gov, Report Product Danger, Health and Welfare, 200 Independence Avenue, SW, Hashtag 118F, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-245-6296, Healthcare Financing Administration HCFA, Department of Health and Human Services, 7500 Security Boulevard, Baltimore, Maryland 21244, 800-638-6833, hcfa.gov, cms.hhs.gov, Health Resources and Services Administration, 5600 Fisher Lane, Rockville, Maryland 20857, 301-443-2086, 800-532-4440, hrsa.dhhs.gov, Hilburton Free Hospital Care Hotline, 800-492-0359 MD, 800-638-0742 outside MD, hrsa.gov/Hilburton, National Cancer Institute, 800-4-Cancer, nci.nih.gov, National Center for Health Statistics, 6525 Bellcrest, Hyattsville, Maryland 20782, National Health Information Center, Department of Health and Human Services, POG 1133, Washington, D.C. 20013-1133, 301-565-4167, 800-336-4797, Nhic-nt.health.org, National Runaway Switchboard, 800-621-4000, Office of Child Support Enforcement, Department of Health and Human Services, 370 L'Enfant Plaza SW, 4th FLE, Washington, D.C. 20447, 202-401-9373, Fax, 202-205-5927, acf.dhhs.gov/program/CSE, Office for Civil Rights, Department of Health and Human Services, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-619-0403, 800-368-1019, 800-537-7697, Office of Managed Care, Healthcare Finance Administration, Department of Health and Human Services, 7500 Security Boulevard, Baltimore, Maryland 21244, 410-786-4164, 800-638-6833, Medicare Hotline, Office of Prepaid Healthcare, Operations and Oversight, Department of Health and Human Services, 200 Independence Avenue SW, Room 423, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-619-3555, Office of Human Development Services, 200 Independence Avenue, SW, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-245-7246, Poison Control Center Database, 200 Independence Avenue, SW, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-619-0257, President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, Department of Health and Human Services, HHH Building, #738H, 200 Independence Avenue, SW, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-690-9000, fax, 202-690-5211, Public Health Service, 200 Independence Avenue, SW, number 716G, Washington, D.C. 20201, 202-245-6296, phs.os.dhhs.gov/phs/phs.html, Social Security Administration, 800 SSA 1213, ssa.gov, Chapter 3, Federal Clearinghouses at wayback.archive.org/all/20190731253/http/www.healthfinder.gov/find-services/search org-type ID equals 5 and show equals 1. Nhs.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. ed.gov/about/offices/lists/osers/cody.html, Clearinghouse on Disability Information, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. The Clearinghouse provides information to people with disabilities, or anyone requesting information, by doing research and providing documents in response to inquiries. abledata.com, AbleData. AbleData provides information on assistive products and rehabilitation equipment for people with disabilities. AbleData's most significant resource is the AbleData database of assistive technology. aspi.hhs.gov/pic, Policy Information Center, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Policy Information Center provides technical assistance and support to the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, ASPE, and the Office of the Secretary as requested. The Center. Bones.nih.gov, NIH Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center, a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, provides patients, health professionals. cdc.gov/niosh/contact, Nhsc Information Inquiry Service, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Nhsc, 800 number is a toll-free technical information service that provides convenient public access to Nhsc and its information resources. cdc.gov/tobacco, Office on Smoking and Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, through its Office on Smoking and Health, OSH, is the lead federal agency for comprehensive tobacco prevention and control. OSH is a division within cpsc.gov/n/about-cpsc/national-injury-information-clearinghouse, National Injury Information Clearinghouse, U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, sponsored by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC. The Clearinghouse disseminates statistics and information relating to the prevention of death and injury associated with consumer products. Diabetes.niddk.nih.gov, NIH National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC, is an information dissemination service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the drugpubs.drugabuse.gov, NIDA Research Dissemination Center. NIDA Drug Pubs Research Dissemination Center distributes materials to virtually all audiences: drug abuse researchers, health professionals, teachers, advocacy groups, teenagers, and the general public. EPA.gov/NSCEP, National Service Center for Environmental Publications. The EPA offers a wide range of publications in English and in many foreign languages. Search for and order publications from this website. eric.ed.gov, Educational Resources Information Center, U.S. Department of Education. The ERIC database uses the latest search and retrieval methods to cull education literature and give high-quality access to educators, researchers, and the general public. fns.usda.gov, Food and Nutrition Information Center. The Food and Nutrition Information Center, FNIC, is a leader in online global nutrition information. Located at the National Agricultural Library, NAL, of USDA, the FNIC website contains over 2,500 links. gsa.gov/portal/category/101011, Federal Citizen Information Center. For more than 40 years, the Federal Citizen Information Center, FCIC, has been a trusted one-stop source for answers to questions about consumer problems and government services. FCIC, part of the General Guideline.gov, National Guideline Clearinghouse Trademark, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. The National Guideline Clearinghouse Trademark, NGC, is a public resource for evidence-based clinical practice guidelines. NGC is an initiative of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, U.S. Department. Health.gov/NHIC, National Health Information Center, NHIC, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The National Health Information Center, NHIC, is a health information referral service sponsored by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. NHIC puts health professionals and consumers. HHS.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Homeless.samhsa.gov/default.aspx, Homelessness Resource Center. The Homelessness Resource Center, HRC, a Center for Mental Health Services initiative, seeks to improve the daily lives of people affected by homelessness and who have mental health and substance use. HUDuser.org/portal, HUD user, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The HUD user website is supported and managed by U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Policy Development and Research, PD&R. HUD user hosts research, publications, periodicals. Kidney.niddk.nih.gov, National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, Nhic, is a service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the National KTDRR.org, the Center for Knowledge Translation for Disability and Rehabilitation Research. The purpose of the Center on Knowledge Translation for Disability and Rehabilitation Research, KTDRR, is to make it easier to find, understand, and use the results of research that can make a positive. LOC.gov/NLS, National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, NLS, Library of Congress. Through a national network of cooperating libraries, NLS administers a free library program of Braille and audio materials circulated to eligible residents in the United States and American citizens living. mchb.hrsa.gov/research-data/mchesp/index.html, Maternal and Child Health Information Resource Center, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Maternal and Child Health Information Resource Center, MCHRC, is dedicated to the goal of helping MCH practitioners on the federal, state, and local levels to improve their capacity to gather, analyze. mcoralhealth.org, National Maternal and Child Oral Health Resource Center. The purpose of the National Maternal and Child Oral Health Resource Center, OHRC, is to respond to the needs of states and communities in addressing current and emerging public oral health issues. OHRC. MinorityHealth.hhs.gov, Office of Minority Health and the Office of Minority Health Resource Center. The Office of Minority Health, OMH, was created in 1986 and is one of the most significant outcomes of the 1985 Secretary's Task Force Report on Black and Minority Health. OMH's primary responsibility. NAL.usda.gov, Food and Nutrition Information Center. The Food and Nutrition Information Center, FNIC, is a leader in online global nutrition information. Located at the National Agricultural Library, NAL, of USDA, the FNIC website contains over 2,500 links. NARIC.com, National Rehabilitation Information Center, National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, National Rehabilitation Information Center, funded by the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, was established in 1977 and provides information on rehabilitation and disability-related. nasuad.org/initiative/national-information-referral-support-center, National Information and Referral Support Center. The National Aging Information and Referral Support Center provides information and referral systems design and management, service delivery, and professional staff development support to state and local. ncmch.org, National Center for Education in Maternal and Child Health, recognizing that high-quality maternal and child health, MCH, services are vital to the health of the nation. Nsemch was established in 1982 at Georgetown University as a national resource to the MCH community. ncfy.acf.hhs.gov, National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth. The National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth, NCFY, is an information resource of the Family and Youth Services Bureau, FYSB, within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. NCFY helps current nhlby.nih.gov/health/contact, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute Information Center. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, Health Information Center is open Monday through Friday 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, closed on federal holidays. Health Information Specialists. nia.nih.gov/Alzheimer's, NIH Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral Center, National Institute on Aging. The Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral, ADIR, Center is a service of the federal government's National Institute on Aging, NIA, one of the National Institutes of Health. The center provides accurate NIOMS.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases Information Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse provides information about various forms of arthritis and rheumatic disease and bone, muscle, and skin diseases in English, Spanish and Chinese. It distributes patient and professional. nichd.nih.gov/publication/pubs.cfm, NIH Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Information Resource Center. The NICD is part of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, a component of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS. The NICD has primary responsibility for conducting and supporting nidcd.nih.gov/health/miscellaneous/pages/clearinghouse.aspx, NIH National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders Information Clearinghouse. The NIDC Information Clearinghouse is a national resource center which provides information on hearing, balance, smell, taste, voice, speech, and language disorders. The Clearinghouse collects and disseminates nidcr.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr. The National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr, was established in 1948 to improve oral, dental, and craniofacial health through research, research training, and dissemination of health. niddk.nih.gov/health-information/health-communication-program/win/pages/default.aspx, NIH Weight Control Information Network, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The Weight Control Information Network, WIN, was established by the National Institutes of Health's, NIH, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr, in June 1994. WIN provides niddk.nih.gov/health-information/health-topics/endocrine/pages/default.aspx, National Endocrine and Metabolic Diseases Information Service. National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Endocrine and Metabolic Diseases Information Service, Nhdis, is a service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the National NIDDK.NIH.gov/health-information/health-topics/blood-diseases/pages/default.aspx, National Hematologic Diseases Information Service, NDIS, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Hematologic Diseases Information Service, NDIS, is a service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the National Institutes. nlm.nih.gov/Nhsr, National Information Center on Health Services Research and Healthcare Technology, Nhtsr, National Information Center on Health Services Research and Healthcare Technology, Nhtsr, works closely with the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, to improve the dissemination of the npic.orst.edu, National Pesticide Information Center, Oregon State University. NPIC provides objective, science-based information about a wide variety of pesticide-related topics, including pesticide product information, information on the recognition and management of pesticide. Ntis.gov, National Technical Information Service, U.S. Department of Commerce. The National Technical Information Service serves as a permanent clearinghouse and largest central resource for government-funded scientific, technical, engineering, and business-related information. Ntis.gov/products/NAC, National Audiovisual Center, U.S. Department of Commerce. The National Audiovisual Center, NAC, is the central source for purchasing or renting the more than 8,000 federally produced audiovisual programs available to the public. Requests for information may be qualitymeasures.ahrq.gov, National Quality Measures Clearinghouse Trademark, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. NQMC is an initiative of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is a database and website for information on specific evidence-based health. raconline.org, Rural Assistance Center. The Rural Assistance Center, RAC, serves as a rural health and human services information portal which helps rural communities and other rural stakeholders access the full range of available programs. ric.nal.usda.gov, Rural Information Center, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Rural Information Center, RIC, assists local communities by providing information and referral services to local, tribal, state, and federal government officials, community organizations, libraries. water.epa.gov/drink/hotline/index.cfm, Safe Drinking Water Hotline. The EPA Safe Drinking Water Hotline provides the general public, regulators, medical and water professionals, academia, and media, with information about drinking water and groundwater programs authorized. womenshealth.gov, Office on Women's Health. The Office on Women's Health, in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is the government's champion and focal point for women's health issues. Works to redress inequities in research. epa.gov/lead/form/lead-hotline-national-lead-information-center, National Lead Information Center. The National Lead Information Center, NLIC, provides the general public and professionals with information about lead hazards and their prevention. NLIC operates under a contract with the U.S. Environmental. Chapter 4. Federal agencies at wayback.archive.org/all/20190703122524/http/www.healthfinder.gov/find-services/search-org-type.aspx, org-type ID equals 4 and show equals 1. hhs.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. accessdashboard.gov, Access Board, United States Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, created in 1973. The board is the federal agency which develops minimum guidelines and requirements for standards issued under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and the Architectural Barriers Act. acf.hhs.gov, Administration for Children and Families, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Administration for Children and Families, ACF, is a federal agency funding state, territory, local, and tribal organizations to provide family assistance, welfare, child support, child care, head. acf.hhs.gov/program/cb, Office of Child Care, Administration for Children and Families. The Office of Child Care, OCC, supports low-income working families by promoting access to affordable, quality early care and after-school programs. OCC administers the Child Care and Development Fund, CCDF. acf.hhs.gov/program/OHS, Office of Head Start, Administration for Children and Families. The Head Start program provides grants to local public and private nonprofit and for-profit agencies to provide comprehensive child development services to economically disadvantaged children and families. acf.hhs.gov/program/ANA, Administration for Native Americans, Administration for Children and Families/HHS. The Administration for Native Americans, ANA, was established in 1974 through the Native American Programs Act, NAPA. ANA is the only federal agency serving all Native Americans, including 562 federally. acl.gov/program/ad/index.aspx, Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. The Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, AIDD, ensures that individuals with developmental disabilities and their families participate in the design of and have access to culturally. acl.gov/program/nedlrr/index.aspx, National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research. The National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, NIDLR, is a federal government grants-making agency that sponsors grantees to generate new disability and rehabilitation. acl.gov/program/ad/program/bcpid/index.aspx, President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities. The President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities, PID, formerly the President's Committee on Mental Retardation, has served in an advisory capacity to the President and the Secretary. ahrq.gov, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality's, AHRQ, mission is to improve the quality, safety, efficiency, and effectiveness of healthcare for all Americans. Information from AHRQ's research helps. ahrq.gov/research/order/order-research-activities.html, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality Publications Clearinghouse. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Qualities, formerly the Agency for Healthcare Policy and Research, publications cover such topics as medical treatment effectiveness, healthcare costs and utilization. AirForceMedicine.af.mil, Air Force Surgeon General. The Office of the Air Force Surgeon General, AF/SG, develops and implements medical programs and policies that provide for the health care of active duty and retired military personnel and their family. AOA.gov, Administration on Aging. The Administration on Aging, AOA, is the federal agency responsible for advancing the concerns and interests of older people and their caregivers. AOA works with and through the Aging Services Network. afis.usda.gov/wps/portal/afis/home Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The purpose of this agency is to provide leadership in ensuring the health and care of animals and plants, improving agricultural productivity and competitiveness, and contributing to the national economy. armymedicine.mil/pages/home.aspx, Office of the Surgeon General of the Army, Department of Defense, medical benefits programs for Army personnel and eligible civilians, including dependents, are developed and administered by the Office of the Surgeon General of the Army. The office responds to inquiries. armymedicine.mil/pages/contact-us.aspx, Office of the Surgeon General of the Army, Department of Defense, medical benefits programs for Army personnel and eligible civilians, including dependents, are developed and administered by the Office of the Surgeon General of the Army. The office responds to inquiries. ars.usda.gov/main/main.htm, Agricultural Research Service. The Agricultural Research Service, ARS, is the main in-house research arm of the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. ARS conducts research to develop and transfer solutions to agricultural. aspi.hhs.gov/pic, Policy Information Center, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Policy Information Center provides technical assistance and support to the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, ASPE, and the Office of the Secretary as requested. The Center. aspi.hhs.gov, Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, ASPE, advises the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services on policy development in health, disability, human services, data, and science. atsdr.cdc.gov, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry Information Center, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ETSDR, is a federal public health agency of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. ETSDR serves the public by using the best science, taking bhpr.hrsa.gov, Bureau of Health Professions, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Bureau of Health Professions, BHPR, Health Resources and Services Administration, improves the health status of the population by providing national leadership in the development, distribution and bhpr.hrsa.gov/nursing/index.html, Division of Nursing, Bureau of Health Professions, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Division of Nursing is the key federal focus for nursing education and practice. The division provides national leadership to assure an adequate supply and distribution of qualified nursing personnel. BIA.gov, Bureau of Indian Affairs. The mission of the Bureau of Indian Affairs is to act as the principal agent of the United States in carrying out the government-to-government relationship that exists between the United States and the bioethicsarchive.georgetown.edu/pcsbi/node/851.html, Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues. The Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues advises the President on bioethical issues that may emerge from advances in biomedicine and related areas of science and technology. The Commission. BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Department of Labor. Through its Office of Employment Projections, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, develops 10-year projections of industry and occupational employment for use in career counseling and educational planning. Bones.nih.gov, NIH Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center. The National Institutes of Health, NIH, Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center, a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, provides patients, health professionals. bphc.hrsa.gov, Bureau of Primary Healthcare, Health Resources and Services Administration. HRSA's primary healthcare programs have their roots in the Migrant Health Act of 1962 and the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, which established funding for the first community-based clinics that were cam.cancer.gov/cam, NIH Office of Cancer Complementary and Alternative Medicine, National Cancer Institute. The Office of Cancer Complementary and Alternative Medicine, ACAM, is an office of the National Cancer Institute, NCI, in the Division of Cancer Treatment and Diagnosis. ACAM is responsible for NCI's Cancer.gov, NIH National Cancer Institute. The National Cancer Institute, NCI, is part of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, which is one of 11 agencies that compose the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. The NCI is the federal. cc.nih.gov, Nih Clinical Center, CC. The Nih Clinical Center consists of the Warren Grant Magnuson and Mark O. Hatfield Clinical Research Centers. Established in 1953 as the research hospital of the NIH, the center is designed so that patient cdc.gov/NCHHSTP, National Center for HIV, STD, and TB Prevention, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC's National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention maximizes public health and safety nationally and internationally through the elimination, prevention, and control of disease. cdc.gov/NCEZID/index.html, National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC's National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, NSID, aims to detect, prevent, and control infectious diseases from spreading, whether they are naturally occurring, unintentional. cdc.gov/oralhealth/index.htm, Division of Oral Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. The Division of Oral Health, DO, serves as a national resource for activities to prevent oral diseases and to improve oral health. DO can provide information on fluoridation, dental sealants, activities. cdc.gov/NCEZID, National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. The National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, NSID, aims to prevent disease, disability, and death caused by a wide range of infectious diseases. NSID focuses on diseases that cdc.gov/Minority Health, CDC's Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. The Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, OMHE, aims to accelerate the work of CDC and its partners in improving health by eliminating health disparities, promoting conditions conducive to health. cdc.gov/Global Health, Center for Global Health, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. CDC's Center for Global Health coordinates and manages the agency's resources and expertise to address global challenges such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, emergency and refugee health, non-communicable diseases. cdc.gov, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is the primary federal agency for conducting and supporting public health activities in cdc.gov/hepatitis/aboutus.htm, Division of Viral Hepatitis, National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention. The Division of Viral Hepatitis, DVH, is part of the National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention at CDC. In collaboration with domestic and global partners, DVH provides the scientific cdc.gov/NCEZID/Dvbd, Division of Vector-Borne Diseases, National Center for Zoonotic, Vector-Borne, and Enteric Diseases/CDC. The Division of Vector-Borne Diseases, Dvbd, strives to protect the nation from bacterial and viral diseases transmitted by mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. Some of these diseases have long been present in cdc.gov/NCBDDD/disability and health/index.html, Disability and Health Programs, National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities/CDC, working within CDC's National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities Division of Human Development and Disability. The mission of the Disability and Health Team is to promote the health. cdc.gov/reproductivehealth/index.htm, Division of Reproductive Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion/CDC. CDC's Division of Reproductive Health is the focal point for issues related to women's and men's reproductive concerns. The division's mission is to promote optimal reproductive, maternal, and infant health. cdc.gov/dhdsp/index.htm, Division for Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion/CDC. CDC's Division for Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention works to improve cardiovascular health through public health strategies and policies that promote healthy lifestyles and behaviors, healthy environments. cdc.gov/parasites, Division of Parasitic Diseases and Malaria, Center for Global Health. CDC's Division of Parasitic Diseases and Malaria, DPDM, prevents and controls parasitic diseases in the United States and throughout the world by providing diagnostic, consultative, and epidemiologic services. cdc.gov/nccdphp/dnpow/index.html, Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity, DNPOW, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity, DNPOW, is working to reduce obesity and obesity-related diseases. DNPOW's mission is to lead strategic public health efforts to prevent and control. cdc.gov/chronicdisease/index.htm, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, NCCDPHP, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, NCCDPHP, consists of 9 divisions that support a variety of activities that improve the nation's health by preventing chronic. cdc.gov/ncezid/dgmq, Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, CDC. The Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, DGMQ, is a division of the CDC's National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, Nhsc. DGMQ has statutory responsibility to make and cdc.gov/nccdphp/doc, Division of Adult and Community Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion/CDC. CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, NCCDPHP, is at the forefront of the nation's efforts to prevent and control chronic diseases. The Division of Adult and Community. cdc.gov/diabetes, Division of Diabetes Translation, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion/CDC. The Division of Diabetes Translation, DDT, is a part of the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, U.S. Department of Health. cdc.gov/cancer/index.htm, Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, is a leader in nationwide efforts to ease the burden of cancer. Through the Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, DCPC, CDC works with national cdc.gov/Nhs, National Center for Health Statistics, Nhs, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as the nation's principal health statistics agency. The National Center for Health Statistics, NCHS, compiles statistical information to guide actions and policies to improve the health of the American. cdc.gov/nceh/default.htm, National Center for Environmental Health, NCEH, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. CDC's National Center for Environmental Health, NCEH, plans, directs, and coordinates a national program to maintain and improve the health of the American people by promoting a healthy environment. And cdc.gov/injury, National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, NSIPC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In June 1992, CDC established the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, NSIPC. As the lead federal agency for injury prevention, NSIPC works closely with other federal agencies, national. cdc.gov/vaccines, National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, NSIRD, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The mission of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, NSIRD, is the prevention of disease, disability, and death through immunization and by control of respiratory and related diseases. cdc.gov/ncbddd/index.html, National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, CDC. The mission of the CDC's National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, NCBDDD, is to promote the health of babies, children, and adults and enhance the potential for full, productive. cdc.gov/NIOSH, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, is a federal agency established by the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 with responsibility for conducting research and making. cdc.gov/ncpdsid/index.html, National Center for Preparedness, Detection, and Control of Infectious Diseases, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The National Center for Preparedness, Detection, and Control of Infectious Diseases, NCID, provides leadership and brings many partners together to protect the world from infectious diseases. This organization. cdc.gov/NIOSH/contact, NIOSH Information Inquiry Service, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, 800 number is a toll-free technical information service that provides convenient public access to NIOSH and its information resources. cdc.gov/genomics, Office of Public Health Genomics, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Office of Public Health Genomics, OPHG, aims to integrate genomics into public health research, policy, and programs, which could improve interventions designed to prevent and control the country's. cdc.gov/women, Office of Women's Health, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Office of Women's Health works to promote and protect the health, safety, and quality of life of women at every stage of life. cdc.gov/tobacco, Office on Smoking and Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, through its Office on Smoking and Health, OSH, is the lead federal agency for comprehensive tobacco prevention and control. OSH is a division within Census.gov, U.S. Census Bureau. The Bureau of the Census is the preeminent collector and provider of timely, relevant, and quality data about the people and economy of the United States. The Bureau plans to achieve its goals by valuing sharep.research.va.gov, Center for Health Equity Research and Promotion. The Center for Health Equity Research and Promotion's mission is to reduce disparities and promote equity in health and health care among vulnerable groups of veterans and other populations. CMS.gov, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, formerly the Healthcare Financing Administration, HCFA, administers Medicare, Medicaid, related quality assurance programs, and other programs. CNPP.usda.gov, Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion was created within the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1994, and reports to the Office of the Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services. CPSC.gov, U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, is an independent federal regulatory agency that was created in 1972 by Congress in the Consumer Product Safety Act. CPSC has jurisdiction over about cpsc.gov/n/about-cpsc/national-injury-information-clearinghouse, National Injury Information Clearinghouse, U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, sponsored by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC. The Clearinghouse disseminates statistics and information relating to the prevention of death and injury associated with consumer products. CSB.gov, U.S. Chemical Safety Board. This board's mandate is improve worker and community safety through conducting investigations and reporting on findings regarding causes of chemical accidents at fixed facilities, evaluating and advising. DEA.gov, Drug Enforcement Administration, U.S. Department of Justice. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, was created in 1973, as the consolidation of several other federal agencies, to enforce the Controlled Substance Act of 1970. The DEA strives to eliminate drug. Defense.gov/about-office-of-the-secretary-of-defense, Office of the Secretary of Defense. The Office of the Secretary of Defense, OSD, is the principal staff element of the Secretary of Defense in the exercise of policy development, planning, resource management, fiscal, and program evaluation. Defense.gov, U.S. Department of Defense. The purpose of Defense Link is to provide the public with a single, unified starting point for information about the Department of Defense, its organization, and its functions. The Defense Link homepage. DHS.gov, Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has three primary missions: prevent terrorist attacks within the United States, reduce America's vulnerability to terrorism, and minimize the damage from potential. Diabetes.niddk.nih.gov, NIH National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC, is an information dissemination service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the DOL.gov/EBSA, Employee Benefits Security Administration, U.S. Department of Labor. The Employee Benefits Security Administration, EBSA, is committed to educating and assisting the 140 million Americans covered by more than 707,000 private retirement plans, 2.5 million health plans, and DOL.gov, U.S. Department of Labor. The Department of Labor fosters and promotes the welfare of the job seekers, wage earners, and retirees of the United States by improving their working conditions, advancing their opportunities for profitable. DOL.gov/ODP, Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP acts as a catalyst for job formation for people with disabilities through policy analysis and grants, outreach and education, technical assistance, and the promotion and development of best practices. DOL.gov/WHD, Wage and Hour Division, U.S. Department of Labor. The DOL Wage and Hour Division, WHD, is responsible for enforcing some of our nation's most comprehensive federal labor laws on topics, including the minimum wage, overtime pay, record-keeping, youth employment. DOLATA.gov, Employment and Training Administration, U.S. Department of Labor. The Employment and Training Administration, EDA, administers federal government job training and worker dislocation programs, federal grants to states for public employment service programs, and unemployment. DOT.gov, U.S. Department of Transportation. The mission of the Department of Transportation, is to serve the United States by ensuring a fast, safe, efficient, accessible and convenient transportation system that meets our vital national interests. DrugAbuse.gov, NIH National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA. NIDA's mission is to lead the nation in bringing the power of science to bear on drug abuse and addiction. This charge has two critical components. The first is the strategic support and conduct of research. ED.gov, U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education was created in 1980 by combining offices from several federal agencies. The department's mission is to promote student achievement and preparation for global competitiveness. EEOC.gov, U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a person at the workplace. The laws enforced prohibit discrimination. Energy.gov, U.S. Department of Energy. The mission of the Energy Department is to ensure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. epa.gov/aieo/index.htm, American Indian Environmental Office, EPA. Within EPA, the American Indian Environmental Office, AIEO, coordinates the agency-wide effort to strengthen public health and environmental protection in Indian country, with a special emphasis on helping. EPA.gov, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The mission of the EPA is to protect human health and to safeguard the natural environment, air, water, and land upon which life depends. Through the work of its many projects and programs, the EPA's purpose. EPA.gov/pesticides, Office of Pesticide Programs, OXP, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The mission of EPA's Office of Pesticide Programs, OPP, is to protect public health and the environment from the risks posed by pesticides and to promote safer means of pest control. EPA.gov/compliance/environmental-justice/index.html, Office of Environmental Justice, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. EPA's goal is to provide an environment where all people enjoy the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to maintain a healthy. EPA.gov/air, Office of Air and Radiation, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Some of EPA's top priorities are to improve air quality, take action on climate change, and clean up our communities. EPA's work on these priorities falls under the Clean Air Act and includes developing FOSDcenter.samhsa.gov, SAMHSA Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, FASD, Center for Excellence. The SAMHSA Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, FASD, Center for Excellence is a federal initiative devoted to preventing and treating FASD. The center's website provides information, resources about FASD. FCC.gov, Federal Communications Commission. The Federal Communications Commission is an independent federal agency responsible directly to Congress. Established by the Communications Act of L. 934, it is charged with regulating interstate and international. FDA.gov/animal-veterinary/default.htm, Center for Veterinary Medicine, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The Center for Veterinary Medicine, CVM, regulates the manufacture and distribution of drugs and feed additives intended for animals. These include animals from which human foods are derived, as well as FDA.gov/biologics-blood-vaccine/default.htm, Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, CBER. The Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, CBER, is a center within the Food and Drug Administration, an agency within the United States government's Department of Health and Human Services. CBER's FDA.gov/drug/default.htm, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, CDER, performs an essential public health task by making sure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the health of people in the United States. FDA.gov/about-FDA/centers offices/office of food/CFS and/default.htm, FDA Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. The Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, FSAN, is one of 5 product-oriented centers of the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. The mission of FSAN is to promote and protect the public health. FDA.gov/medical devices/default.htm, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health, CDRH, is responsible for regulating firms who manufacture, repackage, relabel, and/or import medical devices sold in the United States. In addition, CDRH. FDA.gov/about-FDA/centers offices/OC/Office of Women's Health/default.htm, FDA Office of Women's Health, the Food and Drug Administration Office of Women's Health, was established by congressional mandate in 1994. The mission of the office is to protect and advance the health of women through policy. fda.gov/about fda/centers offices/oc/office of external affairs/ucm343095.htm, Office of Health and Constituent Affairs. The Office of Health and Constituent Affairs provides internal coordination on FDA activities related to patient advocacy, health professional organizations, consumer groups, state organizations, and industry. fda.gov/default.htm, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. FDA is responsible for protecting the public health by assuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, medical devices, our nation's food supply, cosmetics. fda.gov/for-industry/developing product tests for rare diseases conditions/default.htm, Office of Orphan Products Development, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The FDA's Office of Orphan Products Development, OOPD, is dedicated to promoting the development of products that demonstrate promise for the diagnosis and/or treatment of rare diseases or conditions. FEMA.gov, Federal Emergency Management Agency. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, works to reduce risk, strengthen support systems and help people and their communities prepare for and cope with disasters regardless of the cause. FEMA is Fitness.gov, President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. The President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, PCFSN, is a committee of up to 25 volunteer citizens appointed by the President to serve in an advisory capacity through the Secretary of Health. FMCSA.dot.gov, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, was established as a separate administration within the U.S. Department of Transportation on January 1, 2000, pursuant to the Motor Carrier Safety. FNS.USDA.gov, Food and Nutrition Information Center. The Food and Nutrition Information Center, FNIC, is a leader in online global nutrition information. Located at the National Agricultural Library, NAL, of USDA, the FNIC website contains over 2,500 links. FNS.USDA.gov/FNS, Food and Nutrition Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture. This division of the USDA is responsible for the administration of all USDA's nutrition assistance programs, food stamps, WIC program/farmers market, child nutrition, team nutrition, and food distribution. FSIS.USDA.gov/WPS/portal/FSIS/HOM, Food Safety and Inspection Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, a public health agency in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, ensures that the nation's commercial supply of meat, poultry, and egg products is safe, wholesome. Genome.gov, NIH National Human Genome Research Institute, NGRI. The National Human Genome Research Institute, NGRI, led the National Institutes of Health's contribution to the International Human Genome Project, which had as its primary goal the sequencing of the globalhealth.gov, Office of Global Health Affairs, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of Global Health Affairs provides support to the Assistant Secretary for Health and the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services in developing policy and coordinating activities. GPO.gov, U.S. Government Printing Office. The U.S. Government Printing Office, GPO, was founded in 1861 for the production of U.S. government documents. GPO was assigned the additional duties of sales and distribution in 1895. Yearly sales today. Grants.gov, Grants.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Grants.gov was established as a governmental resource to improve government services to the public and helps organizations find, apply, and succeed at accessing federal funding. The website is essential. Grants.nih.gov/grants/or.htm, NIH Office of Extramural Research, OR provides the corporate framework for NIH research administration, ensuring scientific integrity, public accountability, and effective stewardship of the NIH extramural research portfolio. Extramural. gsa.gov/portal/category/100000, U.S. General Services Administration. The U.S. General Services Administration, GSA, oversees the business of the U.S. federal government. GSA's acquisition solutions supplies federal purchasers with cost-effective high-quality products and gsa.gov/portal/category/101011, Federal Citizen Information Center. For more than 40 years, the Federal Citizen Information Center, FCIC, has been a trusted one-stop source for answers to questions about consumer problems and government services. FCIC, part of the General HAB.HRSA.gov, HIV/AIDS Bureau, Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA's HIV/AIDS Bureau, HAB, provides leadership and resources to assure access to and retention in high-quality, integrated care and treatment services for vulnerable people living with HIV/AIDS and their Health.gov, Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The mission of the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, ODP, is to provide leadership for disease prevention and health promotion among Americans. ODP undertakes this mandate through health.gov/NHIC, National Health Information Center, NHIC, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The National Health Information Center, NHIC, is a health information referral service sponsored by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. NHIC puts health professionals and consumers. Healthit.gov, Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology. The Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, ONC, is at the forefront of the administration's health IT efforts and is a resource to the entire health system to support the hhs.gov/partnership/about/index.html, HHS Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. The HHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, the Partnership Center, leads HHS efforts to build and support partnerships with faith-based and community organizations in order to better hhs.gov/ocr/office/index.html, Office for Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Department of Health and Human Services, through the Office for Civil Rights, OCR, promotes and ensures that people have equal access to and opportunity to participate in and receive services in hhs.gov/nvpo, National Vaccine Program Office, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The National Vaccine Program Office coordinates vaccine-related activities between other Department of Health and Human Services agencies, and provides leadership to carry out the disease prevention goals. hhs.gov/ASH, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services OPHS. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, ASH, oversees 14 core public health offices including the Office of the Surgeon General and the U.S. Public Health Service Corps as well as 10 regional. hhs.gov/ASH/OHIDP, Office of HIV/AIDS and Infectious Disease Policy, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of HIV/AIDS and Infectious Disease Policy, AHAIP, within the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, ASH, advises the Assistant Secretary for Health and Senior U.S. Department of Health. hhs.gov/ORP, Office of Human Research Protections, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office for Human Research Protections, OHRP, provides leadership in the protection of the rights, welfare, and well-being of subjects involved in research conducted or supported by the U.S. Department. hhs.gov, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is the United States government's principal agency for protecting the health of all Americans and providing essential human services, especially for those hhs.gov/about/leadership/secretary/index.html, Office of the Secretary, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Department of Health and Human Services is the United States government's principal agency for protecting the health of all Americans and providing essential human services, especially for those who. hhs.gov/opa/index.html, Office of Family Planning, Office of Population Affairs. The Family Planning Program, authorized under Title X of the Public Health Service Act, is administered within the Office of Population Affairs by the Office of Family Planning, OFP. The Title X Program. hhs.gov/opa, Office of Population Affairs. The Office of Population Affairs, OPA, serves as the focal point to advise the Secretary and the Assistant Secretary for Health on a wide range of reproductive health topics, including family planning. HRSA.gov, Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, an agency of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is the primary federal agency for improving access to health care services for people. HRSA.gov/about/organization/bureau/HSB, Healthcare Systems Bureau, Health Resources and Services Administration. HRSA's Healthcare Systems Bureau, HSB, protects the public health and improves the health of individuals through an array of programs that provide national leadership and direction in targeted areas. HSB. HRSA.gov/Hansen's Disease, National Hansen's Disease, Leprosy, Program. The National Hansen's Disease Program is the epicenter of Hansen's disease, leprosy, care, research, and information in the U.S. It cares for patients at its facility at the Ochsner Medical Center in Baton. HRSA.gov/Rural Health, Office of Rural Health Policy, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Office of Rural Health Policy, ORHP, coordinates activities related to rural health care within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Part of the Health Resources and Services Administration. HRSA.gov/grants/index.html, Office of Grants Management, Bphc's Office of Grants Management, OGM, assists the general public, funded agencies, Office of Rural Health Policy, ORHP, and field office staff in preparing applications, provides consultation about. HRSA.gov/telehealth, Office for the Advancement of Telehealth, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Office for the Advancement of Telehealth, OAT, promotes the use of telehealth technologies for healthcare delivery, education, and health information services. The office is part of the Office of HUD.gov, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The mission of this federal agency is to help the nation's communities meet their development needs, spur economic growth in distressed neighborhoods, provide housing assistance for the poor, help rehabilitate. HUDuser.org/portal, HUD user, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The HUD user website is supported and managed by U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Policy Development and Research, PD&R. HUD user hosts research, publications, periodicals. IHS.gov, Indian Health Service, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Indian Health Service, IHS, an agency within the Department of Health and Human Services, is responsible for providing federal health services to American Indians and Alaska Natives. The provision. IRS.gov, Internal Revenue Service. The IRS is the largest agency in the Department of the Treasury and services America's taxpayers by helping them understand and meet their tax responsibilities and enforce the law with integrity and fairness. Justice.gov/OVW, Office on Violence Against Women, OVW. The Office on Violence Against Women Office, OVW, is a component of the U.S. Department of Justice. Created in 1995, OVW implements the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, and subsequent legislation and Justice.gov/OTJ, Office of Tribal Justice, U.S. Department of Justice. The Office of Tribal Justice is the primary point of contact for the Department of Justice with federally recognized Native American tribes, and advises the department on legal and policy matters pertaining. Justice.gov, U.S. Department of Justice. The U.S. Department of Justice is headed by the Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the federal government, whose main responsibility is to represent the United States in legal matters. Kidney.niddk.nih.gov, National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, Nhic, is a service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the National loc.gov/NLS, National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, NLS, Library of Congress. Through a national network of cooperating libraries, NLS administers a free library program of Braille and audio materials circulated to eligible residents in the United States and American citizens living. loc.gov/rr/scitex/index.html, Science Reference Section, Science, Technology, and Business Division, Library of Congress. The Science Reference Section, Science, Technology, and Business Division provides reference services and serves as a focal point for the millions of books, journals, and technical reports on scientific. loc.gov, Library of Congress. The library's mission is to make its resources available and useful to the Congress and the American people, and to sustain and preserve a universal collection of knowledge and creativity for future generations. mchb.hrsa.gov/program/emergency medical, Emergency Medical Services for Children. The Federal Emergency Medical Services for Children, EMSC, program is designed to ensure that all children and adolescents, no matter where they live, attend school, or travel, receive appropriate care. mchb.hrsa.gov, Maternal and Child Health Bureau, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Maternal and Child Health Bureau, MCHB, of the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, administers a broad range of program services to med.navy.mil/site/enmcpHC/environmental-health/pages/home.aspx, Navy Environmental Health Center. The mission of this branch of the Armed Services is to ensure Navy and Marine Corps readiness through leadership in prevention of disease and promotion of health. To achieve this goal, Nhc's vision is med.navy.mil/pages/default.aspx, Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, Navy Medicine, U.S. Department of the Navy. An Act of Congress established the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, BUMD, as part of the Department of the Navy on August 31, 1842. BUMD is the central administrative organization of the medical department. MinorityHealth.hhs.gov, Office of Minority Health and the Office of Minority Health Resource Center. The Office of Minority Health, OMH, was created in 1986 and is one of the most significant outcomes of the 1985 Secretary's Task Force Report on Black and Minority Health. OMH's primary responsibility. NAL.USDA.gov, Food and Nutrition Information Center. The Food and Nutrition Information Center, FNIC, is a leader in online global nutrition information. Located at the National Agricultural Library, NAL, of USDA, the FNIC website contains over 2,500 links. NAL.USDA.gov, National Agricultural Library, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The National Agricultural Library was created as the departmental library for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1862 and became a national library in 1962. One of 4 national libraries of the United. Nano.cancer.gov, NCI Alliance for Nanotechnology in Cancer. The NCI Alliance for Nanotechnology in Cancer is a comprehensive, systematized initiative encompassing the public and private sectors designed to accelerate the application of the best capabilities of NASA.gov, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Since its inception in 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, has accomplished many great scientific and technological feats in air and space. NASA's mission is to pioneer the future. Nationalservice.gov, Corporation for National and Community Service. The Corporation for National and Community Service is a federal agency that engages 5.5 million Americans in service through its Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, and Learn and Serve America programs, and leads. NCD.gov, National Council on Disability. The National Council on Disability, NCD, is a small, independent federal agency charged with advising the President, Congress, and other federal agencies regarding policies, programs, practices, and procedures. NCEI.NOAA.gov, National Centers for Environmental Information. NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information, NCEI, is responsible for preserving, monitoring, assessing, and providing public access to the nation's treasure of climate and historical weather. NCFY.ACF.HHS.gov, National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth. The National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth, NCFY, is an information resource of the Family and Youth Services Bureau, FYSB, within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. NCFY helps current NDEP.NIH.gov, National Diabetes Education Program. The National Diabetes Education Program, NDEP, is a federally sponsored initiative, involving public and private partners. NDEP's goal is to reduce the morbidity and mortality associated with diabetes. Nhc.noaa.gov, National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service. The National Hurricane Center's mission is to save lives, mitigate property loss, and improve economic efficiency by issuing the best watches, warnings, forecasts and analyses of hazardous tropical weather. nhl.nih.gov/about/org/ncsdr, National Center on Sleep Disorders Research, NCSDR, NLBI Health Information Center. The National Center on Sleep Disorders Research, NCSDR, located within the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, was established in 1993 to combat nhlbi.nih.gov, NIH National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, the primary responsibility of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, is the scientific investigation of heart, blood vessel, lung, and blood diseases. NLBI oversees resources and research. nhlbi.nih.gov/health/contact, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute Information Center. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, Health Information Center is open Monday through Friday 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, closed on federal holidays. Health Information Specialists. Nhsc.hrsa.gov, National Health Service Corps, Bureau of Primary Healthcare, Health Resources and Services Administration. The National Health Service Corps, NHSC, was established in 1970 to recruit health professionals for health professional shortage areas. Health professionals with service obligations under the NHSC Scholarship. Nhtsf.gov, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Nhtsf, U.S. Department of Transportation. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, was established in 1966. Its highest priority is to reduce deaths, injuries, and economic losses resulting from motor vehicle crashes, improve. nia.nih.gov/Alzheimer's, NIH Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral Center, National Institute on Aging. The Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral, ADIR, Center is a service of the federal government's National Institute on Aging, NIA, one of the National Institutes of Health. The center provides accurate nia.nih.gov/contact, NIH National Institute on Aging, NIA, one of the 27 institutes and centers of NIH, leads a broad scientific effort to understand the nature of aging and to extend the healthy, active years of life. In 1974, Congress granted authority. nia.nih.gov, NIH National Institute on Aging, NIA, one of the 27 institutes and centers of NIH, leads a broad scientific effort to understand the nature of aging and to extend the healthy, active years of life. In 1974, Congress granted authority. nia.nih.gov, NIH National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, NIAAA, the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, NIAAA, supports and conducts biomedical and behavioral research on the causes, consequences, treatment, and prevention of alcoholism and alcohol-related. niaid.nih.gov/pages/default.aspx, NIH National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID. NIAID conducts and supports basic and applied research to better understand, treat, and ultimately prevent infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. For more than 60 years, NIAID research has led. NIOMS.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases, NIOMS. The mission of the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases is to support research into the causes, treatment, and prevention of arthritis and musculoskeletal and skin diseases. NIOMS.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases Information Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse provides information about various forms of arthritis and rheumatic disease and bone, muscle, and skin diseases in English, Spanish and Chinese. It distributes patient and professional. nichd.nih.gov/publication/pubs.cfm, NIH Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Information Resource Center. The Nhc is part of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, a component of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS. The Nhc has primary responsibility for conducting and supporting nichd.nih.gov/pages/index.aspx, NIH National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, NICD. The NICD is part of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, a component of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. The NICD has primary responsibility for conducting and supporting basic nidcd.nih.gov/pages/default.aspx, NIH National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, established in 1988, NID is mandated to conduct and support biomedical and behavioral research and research training in the normal and disordered processes of hearing, balance, smell, taste, voice, speech. nidcr.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr. The National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr, was established in 1948 to improve oral, dental, and craniofacial health through research, research training, and dissemination of health. niddk.nih.gov/pages/default.aspx, NIH National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr, conducts and supports research on many of the most serious diseases affecting public health. The institute supports much of niddk.nih.gov/health-information/health-program/win/pages/default.aspx, NIH Weight Control Information Network, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The Weight Control Information Network, WIN, was established by the National Institutes of Health's, NIH, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr, in June 1994. WIN provides Nhs.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, Nhts. The mission of the Nhts is to reduce the burden of human illness and disability by understanding how the environment influences the development and progression of human disease. To have the greatest impact. NIFA.usda.gov, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA, USDA. NIFA's unique mission is to advance knowledge for agriculture, the environment, human health and well-being, and communities by supporting research, education, and extension programs in the land-grant. nig.nih.gov/pages/default.aspx, NIH National Institute of General Medical Sciences, NIGMES. The National Institute of General Medical Sciences, NIGMES, is one of the National Institutes of Health, the principal medical research agency of the federal government. NIGMES primarily supports research. NIH.gov, National Institutes of Health, NIH, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The NIH mission is to uncover new knowledge that will lead to better health for everyone. NIH provides leadership and direction to programs designed to improve the health of the nation by supporting research. nih.gov/icd/od/ocpl, NIH Office of Communications and Public Liaison. The Office of Communications and Public Liaison, OCPL, is responsible for communicating information on NIH programs and activities to the public, the media, the scientific and medical communities, and nimh.nih.gov/index.shtml, NIH National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, a component of the National Institutes of Health, seeks to reduce the burden of mental illness and behavioral disorders through research on the mind, brain. nimh.nih.gov/about/organization/od/office-of-of-mental-health-research-ormhr.html, Office of Rural Mental Health Research, as congressionally mandated, 1. Directs, plans, coordinates, and supports research activities and information dissemination on conditions unique to those living in rural areas, including research on the nimhd.nih.gov, NIH National Center on Minority Health and Health Disparities. The mission of the National Center on Minority Health and Disparities, NCMHD, is to lead, coordinate, support, and assess the NIH effort to reduce and ultimately eliminate health disparities. In this, nhs.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, NINDS, the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, NINDS, was originally established in 1950. The NINDS conducts and supports research and research training on the causes, prevention, diagnosis. ninr.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Nursing Research, NINR, the National Institute of Nursing Research, NINR, supports clinical and basic research to establish a scientific basis for the care of individuals across the lifespan from management of patients during. NIST.gov, National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, U.S. Department of Commerce, an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce's Technology Administration. NIST's mission is to develop and promote measurement, standards, and technology to enhance productivity, facilitate trade, and nkdep.nih.gov, NIH National Kidney Disease Education Program, National Kidney Disease Education Program, NKDIP, is an initiative of the National Institutes of Health, designed to reduce the morbidity and mortality caused by kidney disease and its complications. nlm.nih.gov, NIH National Library of Medicine, NLM, the National Library of Medicine, NLM, was established in 1836 as the Library of the Army Surgeon General's Office. It was transferred to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and became known. nlm.nih.gov/network.html, National Network of Libraries of Medicine. The purpose of the National Network of Libraries of Medicine Network, NN/LM, is to provide health science practitioners, investigators, educators, and administrators in the United States with timely, convenient. NOAA.gov, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA is an agency that enriches life through science. From daily weather forecasts, severe storm warnings and climate monitoring to fisheries management, coastal restoration, and supporting marine commerce. nps.gov/index.htm, National Park Service. The National Park Service preserves unimpaired the natural and cultural resources and values of the national park system for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. The NRC.gov, U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The mission of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, is to ensure adequate protection of the public health and safety, the common defense and security, and the environment in the use of nuclear. Nhsf.gov, National Science Foundation. This is an independent U.S. government agency responsible for promoting science and engineering through programs that invest over $3.3 billion per year in almost 20,000 research and education projects. NTIA.doc.gov, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce. This agency is the principal voice of the executive branch of the U.S. Department of Commerce on domestic and international telecommunications and information technology issues. NTIA works to spur innovation. NTIS.gov, National Technical Information Service, U.S. Department of Commerce. The National Technical Information Service serves as a permanent clearinghouse and largest central resource for government-funded scientific, technical, engineering, and business-related information. ntis.gov/products/NAC, National Audiovisual Center, U.S. Department of Commerce. The National Audiovisual Center, NAC, is the central source for purchasing or renting the more than 8,000 federally produced audiovisual programs available to the public. Requests for information may be oas.samhsa.gov, Office of Applied Studies, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, Office of Applied Studies collects and reports on national and state data to assist policymakers, treatment providers, and patients. ods.od.nih.gov, NIH Office of Dietary Supplements, ODs, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, Public Law 103-417, DSHIA, authorized the establishment of the Office of Dietary Supplements, ODs, at the NIH. The ODs was created in 1995 within oig.hhs.gov, Office of Inspector General. The Office of Inspector General's, OIG, mission is to protect the integrity of Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, programs as well as the health and welfare of program beneficiaries. OIG is the OPM.gov, Office of Personnel Management. The Office of Personnel Management, OPM, is the federal government's human resources agency. While daily providing the American public up-to-date employment information, OPM ensures that the nation's organdonor.gov/aboutus.html, Division of Transplantation, Healthcare Systems Bureau/HRSA, the Division of Transplantation, is within the Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration's Healthcare Systems Bureau, HSB. Is the primary federal. ORI.hhs.gov, Office of Research Integrity, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of Research Integrity is responsible for protecting the integrity of PHS extramural and intramural research programs, with the exception of the regulatory research activities of the Food and ORWH.od.nih.gov, NIH Office of Research on Women's Health, Office of Research on Women's Health, ORWH, was established in September 1990 within the Office of the Director at the National Institutes of Health, NIH, to serve as a focal point for women's health research. phe.gov/preparedness/pages/default.aspx, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, formerly the Office of Public Health Emergency Preparedness, was created under the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act in the portal.hud.gov/HUD portal/HUD?SRC=sign/program_offices/fair_housing_equal_op, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, FHEO. The mission of the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, FHEO, is to create equal housing opportunities for all persons living in America by administering laws that prohibit discrimination in housing. Prevention.va.gov/prevention, National Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention, Veterans Health Administration, the National Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention, NCHP, monitors and encourages Veterans Health Administration, VHA, activities that provide, evaluate, and improve preventive medicine services. PTSD.va.gov, National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. The National Center for PTSD is a program of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The center has 7 divisions across the country and carries out a broad range of activities in research, education, and rarediseases.info.nih.gov, NIH Office of Rare Diseases Research. The Office of Rare Diseases Research, ORDR, was established in 1993 within the Office of the Director of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, the federal focal point for biomedical research. ORDR coordinates. Response.restoration.noaa.gov, Office of Response and Restoration, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This Office of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has the following responsibility to respond to spills of oil and other hazardous materials, help emergency planners prepare for potential. RIC.nal.usda.gov, Rural Information Center, U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Rural Information Center, RIC, assists local communities by providing information and referral services to local, tribal, state, and federal government officials, community organizations, libraries. SAMHSA.gov, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Inquiries on mental health, drug abuse, or alcohol can be directed to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, formerly the Alcohol, Drug Abuse, and Mental Health Administration. SAMHSA.gov/workplace, Division of Workplace Programs, Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. The Division of Workplace Programs, DWP, is mandated by executive order and public law to provide oversight for 1. The Federal Drug-Free Workplace Program aimed at elimination of illicit drug use in SSA.gov, Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration provides public information materials about the Social Security and Supplemental Security Income, SSI, programs, as well as information on /entitlement to Medicare. surgeongeneral.gov/index.html, Office of the Surgeon General, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of the Surgeon General, under the direction of the Surgeon General, oversees the operations of the 6,500-member commissioned corps of the U.S. Public Health Service and provides support for uzaki.army.mil/home.aspx, Army Corps of Engineers. The United States Army Corps of Engineers, USAS, is made up of approximately 34,600 civilian engineers, scientists, and other specialists and 650 military members who work hand in hand as leaders in engineering. USAID.gov, U.S. Agency for International Development. USAID is an independent federal government agency that receives overall foreign policy guidance from the Secretary of State. USAID supports long-term and equitable economic growth and advances U.S. foreign. USCCR.gov, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. The United States Commission on Civil Rights, USCR, is an independent, bipartisan, fact-finding agency of the executive branch, first established under the Civil Rights Act of 1957. On November 30, 1983. uscgboating.org, U.S. Coast Guard Boating Safety Division. The Office of Boating Safety oversees the program for the prevention of recreational boat casualties. Activities of the office include enforcement of federal laws and regulations, establishment of pleasure. uscis.gov, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. On March 1, 2003, services formerly provided by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, transitioned into the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, under U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. USDA.gov/wps/portal/USDA/USDA. U.S. Department of Agriculture. The mission of the USDA is to enhance the quality of life for the American people by supporting production of agriculture, ensuring a safe, affordable, nutritious, and accessible food supply, caring for. USFA.FEMA.gov, United States Fire Administration, Federal Emergency Management Agency. The mission of the Federal Emergency Management Agency's U.S. Fire Administration, USFA, is to provide leadership, coordination, and support for the nation's fire prevention and control, fire training and. USGS.gov, U.S. Geological Survey. The U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, serves the nation by providing reliable scientific information to describe and understand the Earth, minimize loss of life and property from natural disasters, manage. VA.gov, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The Veterans Administration was established in 1930 and elevated to cabinet level on March 15, 1989, and is now the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA provides a wide range of veterans benefits in water.epa.gov, Office of Water, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The Office of Water, OWA, is responsible for implementing the Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act, and portions of the Coastal Zone Act Reauthorization Amendments Act of 1990, Resource Conservation. Womenshealth.gov, Office on Women's Health. The Office on Women's Health, OWA, in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is the government's champion and focal point for women's health issues. OWA works to redress inequities in research. womenshealth.gov/about-us, Office on Women's Health, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Office on Women's Health, OWA, part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, works to improve the health and sense of well-being of all U.S. women and girls. OWA serves as the focal. EPA.gov/children, Office of Children's Health Protection, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The mission of this office is to make the protection of children's environmental health a fundamental goal of public health and environmental protection in the United States. The OCHP will support and EPA.gov/about-TPA/about-Office-Solid-Emergency-Response-OSWER, Office of Resource Conservation and Recovery. The Office of the Assistant Administrator for Solid Waste and Emergency Response provides agency-wide policy, guidance, and direction for the agency's solid waste and emergency response programs. The Office. EPA.gov/about-TPA, Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, OXP, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The Office of Prevention, Pesticides, and Toxic Substances, plays an important role in protecting public health and the environment from potential risk from toxic chemicals for now and for generations to. Chapter 5. Health and Human Services Clearinghouses at wayback.archive.org/all/201907031253/https:/www.healthfinder.gov/find-services/search org-type ID equals 22 and show equals 1. aspi.hhs.gov/pic, Policy Information Center, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Policy Information Center provides technical assistance and support to the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, ASPE, and the Office of the Secretary as requested. The Center: bones.nih.gov, NIH Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, Osteoporosis and Related Bone Diseases, National Resource Center, a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, provides patients, health professionals. cdc.gov/tobacco, Office on Smoking and Health, National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, through its Office on Smoking and Health, OSH, is the lead federal agency for comprehensive tobacco prevention and control. OSH is a division within cdc.gov/NIOSH/contact, Nhsc Information Inquiry Service, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Nhsc. 800 number is a toll-free technical information service that provides convenient public access to Nhsc and its information resources. Diabetes.niddk.nih.gov, NIH National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, NDIC, is an information dissemination service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the drugpubs.drugabuse.gov, NIDA Research Dissemination Center. NIDA Drug Pubs Research Dissemination Center distributes materials to virtually all audiences: drug abuse researchers, health professionals, teachers, advocacy groups, teenagers, and the general public. Guideline.gov, National Guideline Clearinghouse Trademark, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. The National Guideline Clearinghouse Trademark, Nhsc, is a public resource for evidence-based clinical practice guidelines. Nhsc is an initiative of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, U.S. Department. Health.gov/Nhic, National Health Information Center, Nhic, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The National Health Information Center, Nhic, is a health information referral service sponsored by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Nhic puts health professionals and consumers. Homeless.samhsa.gov/default.aspx, Homelessness Resource Center. The Homelessness Resource Center, HRC, a Center for Mental Health Services initiative, seeks to improve the daily lives of people affected by homelessness and who have mental health and substance use. Kidney.niddk.nih.gov, National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Kidney and Neurologic Diseases Information Clearinghouse, NCDIC, is a service of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr. The Nidcr is part of the National mchb.hrsa.gov/researchdata/mchesp/index.html, Maternal and Child Health Information Resource Center, Health Resources and Services Administration. The Maternal and Child Health Information Resource Center, MCHRC, is dedicated to the goal of helping MCH practitioners on the federal, state, and local levels to improve their capacity to gather, analyze. mcoralhealth.org, National Maternal and Child Oral Health Resource Center. The purpose of the National Maternal and Child Oral Health Resource Center, OHRC, is to respond to the needs of states and communities in addressing current and emerging public oral health issues. OHRC. MinorityHealth.hhs.gov, Office of Minority Health and the Office of Minority Health Resource Center. The Office of Minority Health, OMH, was created in 1986 and is one of the most significant outcomes of the 1985 Secretary's Task Force Report on Black and Minority Health. OMH's primary responsibility. ncfy.acf.hhs.gov, National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth. The National Clearinghouse on Families and Youth, NCFY, is an information resource of the Family and Youth Services Bureau, FYSB, within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Nhtsf helps current. nhlby.nih.gov/health/contact, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute Information Center, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, NLBI, Health Information Center is open Monday through Friday 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, closed on federal holidays. Health Information Specialists. nia.nih.gov/Alzheimer's, NIH Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral Center, National Institute on Aging, the Alzheimer's Disease Education and Referral, ATIR, Center is a service of the federal government's National Institute on Aging, NIA, one of the National Institutes of Health. The center provides accurate NIOMS.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases Information Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse provides information about various forms of arthritis and rheumatic disease and bone, muscle, and skin diseases in English, Spanish and Chinese. It distributes patient and professional. nichd.nih.gov/publication/pubs.cfm, NIH Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Information Resource Center. The NICD is part of the National Institutes of Health, NIH, a component of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS. The NICD has primary responsibility for conducting and supporting nidcd.nih.gov/health/miscellaneous/pages/clearinghouse.aspx, NIH National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders Information Clearinghouse. The NIDC Information Clearinghouse is a national resource center which provides information on hearing, balance, smell, taste, voice, speech, and language disorders. The Clearinghouse collects and disseminates nidcr.nih.gov, NIH National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr, the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, Nidcr, was established in 1948 to improve oral, dental, and craniofacial health through research, research training, and dissemination of health. niddk.nih.gov/health-information/health-communication-program/win/pages/default.aspx, NIH Weight Control Information Network, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. The Weight Control Information Network, WIN, was established by the National Institutes of Health's, NIH, National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, Nidcr, in June 1994. WIN provides qualitymeasures.ahrq.gov, National Quality Measures Clearinghouse Trademark, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. NQMC is an initiative of the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is a database and website for information on specific evidence-based health. raconline.org, Rural Assistance Center. The Rural Assistance Center, RAC, serves as a rural health and human services information portal which helps rural communities and other rural stakeholders access the full range of available programs. womenshealth.gov, Office on Women's Health. The Office on Women's Health, in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, is the government's champion and focal point for women's health issues. Works to redress inequities in research,